Hi everybody, it's Daphne. Welcome back to my channel. Today, to kind of wrap up 2022, I'm giving you guys my favorite books that I read this year. They can kind of serve as recommendations for you, or if you're just interested in hearing what I read and what I liked and why, then this video is definitely for you. Just really quickly, I'm gonna plug my bookstagram, which is at daphnebryantwrites. So all my book reading content is housed there, so if you're interested in exploring that further, just wanted to make sure you have that contact. It'll also be in the description below. But let's go ahead and get into my faves from this year. Also, a quick disclaimer, a lot of the books that are my favorites are currently in Boston, where I go to school. I ended up bringing some of my faves from this year over there, so I'll just kind of like put like an image up there, but also talk about it obviously and kind of explain why it's ranked so high on my list. We have 8 picks, and I'm gonna start with starting from my number 1 pick. So my number 1 pick from this year is Six of Crows. So naturally I do have this one with me. Six of Crows is by Leigh Bardugo, if I'm saying that right. Leigh Bardugo. I'm so sorry.
I can never say all his names properly. It's so bad.
This is Six of Crows. This is probably my number 1 book that I read this year. It was so amazing, so good. For those of you who might think that the name of this author is ringing a bell, she also wrote the Shadow and Bone series, and that's kind of how I was first introduced to her. So that's the first series I read of hers, and it was okay. It wasn't the best, and I wasn't really expecting a whole lot coming into this, but Six of Crows is such a step up from Shadow and Bone. So if that's kind of your scenario and you're like, I read Shadow and Bone and it wasn't like phenomenal, and you don't really know if you want to read more of her work, please do read this. Six of Crows. You can even, if you've never heard of her before, I would even recommend just jumping straight into Six of Crows. Like, you might need some little things cleared up. For the most part, like, it stands on its own phenomenally. And it's so interesting that here it is a quote from the creator of Avatar: The Last Airbender, which whenever I think about this book, that's exactly what I think of. Just the kind of dynamics is very similar to this. So if you like that show, you might really enjoy this book. And just in general, I think my favorite thing is all the different types of people in this gang. All 6 of them just have such different personalities and skills and weaknesses and backstories, and we get to learn about them and kind of dive into their characters a lot and their dynamic with each other. And I think that's like the characters are just so well written. I think that's like really something that stands out, but also the imagery is amazing. So moving on to number 2, this is Gilded by Marissa Meyer. So I do not have this book with me, it's back in Boston, but Gilded is one of her darker novels. You might know her for the Lunar Chronicles series, which is one of my favorite ones of all time. But basically, Gilded is a retelling of Rumpelstiltskin, so it's a fairy tale retelling, and it's set in this like very Germanic world, a fantasy world, and it has aspects of magic and fantasy, but it's also gothic, and it's just so different from what I'm like used to from her. And I mean that in the best way. Like, I think it's one of her best works. It's so well written and so imaginative, and I've never read anything quite like it. So I definitely recommend that. Also, the romance in there, top tier. In the number 3 spot, we have Six Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. And again, I have it in Boston, not with me, but it's basically a fantasy novel with a YA female heroine, like most of these books are going to be. And she basically, it's like taking aspects of East Asian mythology and kind of molding it into this really fantastical story about a princess and her 6 brothers and a curse that is set upon them. I hope it's not like weird for me to say this, but it kind of gives me the vibe of an anime. Like, I would love to see this turn into an anime, and I feel like I'm justified in saying this because the author draws on both Chinese and Japanese mythology, so I think it's totally possible to do. But it was just that cinematic, that epic, that intense. Like, I could not put that book down. I was obsessing over it, and the characters, and the romance in there too is also top tier. And in the sequel, it's definitely the highlight of the sequel, which I also read this year. And yeah, I think like if you're looking for like an epic fantasy adventure novel, with like some real mythological aspects that you might not have been privy to before, I definitely recommend. We have Legendborn by Tracy Dion, who actually commented on one of my bookstagram posts. I will never forget it because this book really did just like, it did the same thing that Blood Like Magic by Lizelle Simbury did for me, which I think I might have mentioned in one of my other videos about books on this channel, but just the Black representation in fantasy media, I love to see it, and Bree is a badass. This is like King Arthur retelling, so it's tale as old as time, but it's set in this at this university, UNC in the South, and it follows this really amazing Black girl who is so complex and so multifaceted, and I am just obsessed with everything about this. I think the magic systems are done really well. It's clear that a lot of thought has been put into the structure of how this book is written, which has kicked other books that I really enjoyed off this list, because I feel like not enough attention was paid to detail, but this is so detailed, so creative, so good. I cannot say enough good things about Legendborn. I sped through this, and this is not like a super short book to read. Like, it's a 500-page book. It's not a super short book to read. I literally sped through this thing. I think I read it in 2 or 3 days, and that's just because it's that good. So yeah, the little tagline is some legacies are meant to be broken. So really some amazing stuff in here, some amazing themes about racism, misogyny, homophobia, colors. Like, there's so much here, so definitely recommend. So in the 5th spot, we have Ace of Spades. I have not memorized this author's name and I feel awful about it. I'm going to put it up here, give it a little highlight, because she's phenomenal. She's my age, she's in college, of college age, and she just crafted this story that I will literally never forget. And it's kind of similar to how I said I would love to see Six Crimson Cranes turn into an anime. I would love to see Ace of Spades get a live action movie. That would be so stellar. The author describes it as being a mix between Gossip Girl and Get Out, if you know the Jordan Peele movie. So if that is like any indication as to how wild and intense and amazing and just phenomenal this book is, like, I don't think I have a better way to describe it, to be honest. That is the best way to describe it. It is set at this high school. It follows 2 Black characters, both queer as well, which we love to see, as someone who does identify as queer now. And I just think that, like, there's really, like, she can do no wrong. She can do no wrong. This book is anticipatory. It keeps you going. You're constantly blown away. Like, I really recommend this. I really do, especially if you like kind of like that like horror with a bit of comedy as well. In the number 6 spot, we have Hotel Magnifique. Again, a book that I do not have on me, but this is by Emily J. Taylor, and it's her debut novel. And I had seen it a lot on Book Talk and places like that, and I was like, this looks right up my alley. Essentially, it's about this traveling magical hotel, and this girl and her sister end up wandering into it and just discover this like crazy world with fantastical creatures and powers and places, and it's like a bit of a fever dream, but it's ranked just like a little bit lower on this list because some of the plot is like kind of silly, but I think it's similar to Caraval, if you know that series, in the sense that it's just so beautifully written and so magical that you can kind of get lost in the fact that it's not like 100% logical or like super meaningful in that way. And there are a lot of really cool themes about, and I mean cool as in like it's interesting to read about, not that it's cool to do it, but cool themes concerning like labor practices and indentured servitude and things like that. And I just it's so good. Like, if you're just looking for something to like really get lost in and like feel like a kid again, I definitely recommend Hotel Magnifique. As with all the books that I am mentioning right now, the romances are top tier without really focusing on like a romantic storyline, so this is one of them. In the 7th spot, we have These Violent Delights by, oh my gosh, like on the name, Chloe Gong. And this is again a really young author, female author, which has been a fairly big trend. Like, I think all of these authors are female, and that's not on purpose. I just like they kind of dominate the YA industry, and I mostly read YA, but also I really am inspired by younger female authors and authors of color, so you're definitely gonna see them in this list. But yeah, so going back to these Violent Delights, it's another kind of retelling. As you can tell, retellings are pretty big on my list. But it's a Romeo and Juliet retelling, which you might think Shakespeare, like, it's gonna be like basic, it's gonna be boring, but Chloe just does so many interesting things with this story. For one, it's set in Shanghai, so, and in like the 1920s or something like that. So we're in a different time period, we're in a completely different place. And all of the characters are just so different and well-rounded. We have a trans character, we have a character who feels very Americanized, which is very common, especially in immigrant families, which she kind of like identifies with, having kind of switched between America and China. I love them so much. And like I only have like really good things to say. But These Fine Delights is just well written through and through. It has, again, this fantastical aspects, but it also has a bit of a horror aspect as well. And it's a little bit scary and terrifying. And it's not like an easy read by any means. Like, it definitely has some like darker, deeper themes and topics going on here. I don't know if their romance was even like the highlight for me for this one. I think just the world that it was in and the level of fear the author was able to incite in us as readers was just like a highlight for me. Like, it was impossible for it not to be on this list because it was just that good. And again, we have an author that's like 23. So impressive. Then last but definitely not least, on my top 8 lists of my favorite books. This one I do have with me. It's honestly, out of all the books I have here, it's the most banged up, and it's barely even that way. Like, when I finally get to like rereading and annotating all my books, like, they're all gonna look like crazy. But this was a book I really enjoyed. It's by Emily Henry, so she's kind of like dominating. I don't want to say dominating, but she's definitely becoming a name for herself in the romance world. This is actually, I think, the only book I might have on this list that isn't YA. Technically, it's adult fiction, but it's romance. And she's known for creating storylines that kind of take place like in a vacation spot. So whether that's the beach or whether that's like a small town, very Hallmark vibes, like Book Lovers is pretty high up on my list, just didn't make top 8. And yeah, I just think this is a really great kind of like friends to lovers story, friends to enemies to lovers almost. And it kind of has always like, I don't know, I read this at a time where I needed it to like really fulfill my fantasies about my friend that I really liked at the time, and it really does sweep you up in their romance and their stories, and it's very interesting and different than other romance novels I've read. So I'm not gonna read everything on the back, but I'm just gonna read this like little tagline. So 2 best friends, 10 summer trips, 1 less chance to fall in love. So it basically tells the story of Poppy and Alex, and it kind of time jumps between like a bunch of different points in their life together. And I just think it's so well done and so captivating, and yeah, that's why it's number 8 on my list. So that is my little 2022 book recap for you guys. I'm so happy I got to do this. I've been really missing doing book content. I've been slacking on it this past semester, honestly, and just because I've had so many other things going on, but I'm so happy I got to do this and I got to kind of give you guys some more recommendations. I know that most of these, if you follow my bookstagram, you've probably already gotten those recommendations from me, but just to kind of elaborate on it a little bit more, and for any subscribers or anyone who's watching that like isn't super into books but wants to get into them, then like I definitely recommend this video. As someone who loved reading and then kind of stepped away from it in high school and has just recently gotten back starting in college, all of these books have made an impact on me in some way, which is why I'm recommending them. And yeah, I just so excited about them, so excited to share with you guys. That's all I have for y'all today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the new year.